Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra.
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people
Associated with the creation
Or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked,
and sometimes what didn't,
you will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts
And inspire you to do even greater things. In this episode, you will hear from Mritunjay Singh, Senior Vice President, Infosys, talking about his start of his journey from Tata Steel to very different roles within Infosys, Access, as well as creating unique perspective to technology and how teams can and create wonders. He also talks about having self-belief and ensuring that there are closed feedback loops right as a software engineer to a CEO. Listen on. Hi Munjay, I love our interactions when we were in Infosys, and welcome to Software People Stories podcast.
Thank you, Gayatri. Thanks for having me. What you guys are doing is very interesting, so it's great to be here. Look forward to having an interesting discussion.
We normally start right at how you got yourself started in the technology journey. Before we do that, can you give a quick introduction on what you do currently?
Sure. So my job is a little different than a regular job that people do. As you know, I've always done all kind of things for the company. Currently looking at profitability across the company. And I work directly with CXOs on ensuring that different things are being done with the right balance of cost and profitability.
Wow, that sounds amazing. That sounds like one of those key consulting firms jobs to understand profitability and increase top line and bottom line. Very cool.
Yeah. It's just that I'm inside the company.
So tell me about how your journey started. Software. What were your passions when you got started?
Interesting. See, I was in a steel company. I started after graduation. I started in a steel company. Steel is a very hard industry. That's where I, went to shop floor and started to work on things. Then I realized there are a lot of computing devices. And I was an electronics engineer, so I started to play with computing devices from hardware side. And very soon I realized that software in 92, 93 was getting pretty strong in terms of managing plant operations. So I started to dabble in software there at Tata Steel. And then I thought, if software is so interesting, why don't I go and look for a job in a software company? Out of just a desire to learn software, I ended up at Infosys in 1995. And then I went through a regular training and that's what jump started. So when I joined Infosys, a lot of people used to talk about mainframe, non-mainframe. To me, everything was good because I was coming from a PLC programming. So when you program on PLC and CNC, mainframe is latest technology. And I remember everybody used to tell me, don't worry about mainframe. But when I look back today, most of the tech evolution of today, if you look at the concept has been there in mainframe. The concept of cloud computing, the concept of virtual space, concept of sharing servers, concept of threading of a program. So a lot of these have already been done in the mainframe world because mainframe were designed for large scale compute. So thankfully, my computing fundamentals became very strong because of the fact that I worked on the mainframe. And there were not many tools those days. So you have to worry about coding of the register itself, that whether the register should not overflow if your program is above more than 16 MB in memory. So there are a lot of things that we learned, very good computer fundamentals, thanks to the mainframe exposure. Then, of course, 4 years later, like everybody else, we start to get into client server tech. My passion still is, what I really like to do is get into details. And I love to know things at a great detail and then to be able to go back up at a forest level and take calls. And that's what I'm really passionate about. How can I impact larger ecosystem or a larger thing by knowing details, not just by doing superficial. So that's my real passion and that's what I love doing. It comes in very handy in the job I do. That sounds like an amazing start. Sorry for Tata Steel, but good for the Indian software industry. You were instrumental in winning one of the largest deals for Infosys in 2004 timeframe. It was also in many of the press releases. What are your reflections now thinking 16 years back? How did it happen? You are talking about attention to detail, relationships and everything, right? When I look back to the year 2004, not many people, India did not have outsourcing deal. We were the first one. I wouldn't say first one. I think there was a small company which had signed outsourcing deal in 95, but there was no large scale outsourcing deal happening in India. In a way, it was good because we didn't know. None of my team knew. We were all very young. I was like 9 years out of college, trying to bid on a $2 billion contract. At that time, I don't think my team even knew how to write $2 billion. We were all project managers and, the young guys. And one of my guy was like, I remember his name, Navneet. He was the analyst at that time. And he used to write the most complex governance. And when I took him in a meeting along with a customer, the IBM asked him, the IBM guy who was there for designing governance, he asked us. So he looked at me and says, "You are too young for her to do this." I said, "No, it's not me. It's actually Navneet." He looked at him and says, "How old are you, my son?" And he says, "I'm 34 or something." And the guy says, "Oh, I have 34 years of experience." so I told him, "Yeah, it's good that you have 34 years. Let's look at how to run this contract." And he was amazed with the depth that we had brought. I think the good thing is the team was very young. We did a lot of innovation because we didn't know how to do things. So we reimagined with the way outsourcing is done. Multi-vendor sourcing was very new. At that time, it was like you give to one vendor. And as you know, Infosys was putting huge thought leadership on modular sourcing. And we reinvented a lot of things on modular sourcing. We created operational agreement between two service providers. It was unheard of. Nobody had heard about two service providers to the same customer signing a contract with each other that will deliver a slice of a service line. So it was an amazing experience to do. We were clear from the day we got in. First 4 weeks we were clueless. We had no idea what to do. Then one day we just sat, and Parag and Rekha and Dakshis and a couple of us, and we said, "Look, we can't just sit there and say, look, we don't know how to do this." So in 7 days, we wrote our proposal, the entire 1,200 pages of proposal. And in the entire proposal, they had just 3 places that the customer could pinpoint saying, "Hey, this doesn't add up." So to writing a world-class, extraordinary proposal with a team of people who had no idea. And then when we start, and the customer started to get such a confidence that within a year, customer used to call us saying, "Hey, these guys are agreeing to this. Do you guys think it's the right thing?" And we used to tell him, "No, it's a bad idea. I don't know what they're thinking. You can't have agreement on something that can't do it." So the confidence that the customer built and the way we went about doing that was an amazing experience. Even now and then, I hear a lot of people in our company use that template that we had created 15 years ago. So it's a great feeling to be able to do something pioneering for the Indian IT industry at that time. I think this was the first large scale, like hundreds of millions dollar contract. I remember in 2005, BBC ran a story that how Indian IT for the first time is getting into the big league. And I think it was TCS, us, and even Patni had a small role into that. That was like, of course, a big story in 2005. Interesting experience. It taught me a couple of things. One, you don't need to know a lot of things to do things. Don't worry about what you know or what you don't know. You need to be confident and you need to reimagine the way things are being done. And the secondly, it's extremely important to have confidence in your team. It doesn't matter where they come from, whether they are successful in the prior stint or not. My entire team was built of people who are assembled. None of them worked with me before that. You have to have a confidence that they will do the right thing. And the third very important thing which I realized, my biggest learning in that was meritocratization of ideas is extremely important. If you're running a team, don't make it hierarchical. Don't say, "I'm the boss, I decide what is good for the team or what is good for the customer." Ideas come from people which are very different. We had one guy who would draw up a slide before making a slide. And nobody thought that's a skill. We thought, what's the big deal about doing that? But when you're high pressure and you have to take one pic, present to CXO of a bank, $2 billion deal, what you are trying to convey, then that comes in extremely handy. So the kind of skills people bring, to just be aware of that, and make sure all ideas are pulled in. I think that was my biggest learning out of it.
Extremely well put, Munjay. You're talking about building a team, trusting them, as well as empowering them to do the best. And we keep talking about cross-functional team in the software development. It is the same across, right? It is not just for software. You look at those patterns in every high-performing team.
Absolutely. Any team. I mean, it doesn't have to be software. Any team, you look at whether it's governance, whether it's cross-functional. You need to get the people, empower them, make them believe that they can walk on the water, and then trust them. If you can trust them, they will walk on the water. And I think that is the magic you can create if you're convinced that you're chasing a higher goal. If it is just about doing a job, I don't think we'll be able to do that. We were definitely chasing a higher goal. All of us knew that if we do this, it will be the first for Indian IT at that scale. So that goal was bigger than the job. That was bigger than even
And I was part of the development that deal, and it was phenomenal when it came. I remember the due diligence document. Due diligence had almost, if there were almost 120 columns to describe each application, and the existing teams who have been there with the bank for almost 15, 20 years, they didn't know. They used to come and ask, what is this document? And
I'll
that
tell you,
information
tell you a
gathering
story
happened
about.
in 2 weeks.
I'll tell you a story about due diligence. So there were like 10 suppliers put in due diligence room, and all of us were like next to each other. It was very interesting because there was like the big guys, the big five at that time, the IBMs and the Accentures of the world, there was us and the Indian IT. And of the Indian IT, I think only TCS guys spending some time inside the room. And all the other guys, I remember during the lunch break, they will come out and look at us and say, don't you guys get bored? What are you guys doing inside? So they used to think that there's nothing to do. Whereas our team was going with every document that was put, and the amount of requests we used to send to the bank saying, yeah, I need to look at this contract. And they were like amazed. It's like, we don't have this. No, we need to take a look at this. So the detail we went into was amazing. I mean, there was an experience. When we started, when it came out, and when we delivered the document, the bank said, we are learning stuff about our own bank. So it was very, very, very interesting.
Changing here, you were a head of Pune Development Center for before your stint outside of Infosys, right? So I know Pune DC grew huge in terms of infrastructure, in terms of the kind of marquee clients that you are having. Talk us about that.
Well, it was very good. I think that time was around 2009 to 12. We were around 25,000 people. It's a fairly large center. I mean, it had become almost the largest, from a headcount perspective, the largest center outside of in India for Infosys. It was fairly large in terms of operations. Complexity was huge. Also because we were the biggest in Hinjawadi. So I also, that time, I took over presidentship of Hinjawadi Industry Association because we realized that if I have to run a setup as large as Infosys was at that time, 25,000 people, I exist in an ecosystem. That ecosystem needs to be also taken along. So that's how I ended up at HIA. And it was very interesting because we worked very, very closely with government. We solved a lot of problems in that area. The roads people still complain about traffic there, but those days it was like one single road. So we got roads built, we got alternate power lines built, we got alternate water supply built. We de-risked a lot of stuff. We worked very closely with the community around because we believe that it can't be just about going to work. There's the villages nearby. We went to the school and we rebuilt the school, and Infosys Foundation donated 50%, and the remaining 50% was raised by employees of Pune Center. So there was like rebuilding an entire school for a village. It's a huge project. At that time, it was worth more than 1 CR. And we raised half of that money by employees, and the employees went there and participated. So it rallied people around a larger cause. It also gave a sense of community. That if you're in an ecosystem, it's not just, you can't just do a job. You be in a nice house, get in a car, go to office, and live in a bubble. There is a world outside of our bubble. Persians are very conscious social people. So we tapped into this and we got them outside and we started to get engaged in a lot of community work. So I think it was very good. We were able to tide through any challenges which people have experienced. Typically, when you have industrial areas, there's a lot of conflict community around, but we were able to manage all of that very, very comfortably. I think people were extremely, extremely cooperative with us, and we were very helpful. We worked closely with them. So it was a very different experience, and running such a large center in terms of scale, get people. If you're rolling out something, then there's a huge amount of people to communicate. How do you communicate to thousands and thousands of people about something that we want to roll out? So it's a very interesting learning. I cut my teeth in not just handling scale, but also about community. I think that is my valuable experience. That helps even today. I get involved with, we have a trust that we do a lot of social work. Seeds of that was started in 2009-10 when I was running the center.
I didn't realize that it was, I thought you were going to talk about more from a recruitment perspective, people development perspective, cultural changes perspective. It is a lot more than that, right? It's an ecosystem development and creating a sense of purpose and unity.
See, those to me are table stakes, right? I mean, if you're running a large center, you have to ensure that people are motivated and all. But I strongly believe that, unless people have something bigger to look after, if you're just doing your job, then you can only add so much value to whatever you're trying to do. If you're doing something beyond that, then when your job becomes richer, you actually end up doing things that you never thought. I'll give a simple example. The sense of belonging to a community and the fact that there is a larger population outside, which is not so privileged like people in the tech world, you start to realize and count your blessings that you have because you are in a technology world. I mean, that's a huge change. The perception that, oh my God, I'm missing something, to say, oh my God, I have so much, right? That's a huge mindset shift. And now, if I just focus on trying to tell people that it's not going to work. What will work is if they go out and see and they can contribute. And the reality is, India is still evolving. I mean, we have a lot more to do. And I'm glad, I'm so happy to see the youngsters, the amount of time, energy, and resources they invest. And this has been consistent. Even in 2009, I used to see that. I see this even today. The youngsters are extremely positive about India. They go out there, they invest their time, energy, resources, and ensure that the rest of community comes up. And that, I think, is the biggest value that we can derive out of a young population that is working in a tech world.
Yeah, and counting your blessings. If we count our blessings, I think Cosmos will help us. If we contribute to somebody, I think it's a circle, right? It keeps coming back.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And talking of software deals, right? How has that changed? I know we talk about API dynamics, cloud migration, becoming smaller teams. Everything is becoming smaller and smaller, right? Small is becoming beautiful. We speak about microservices, SaaS products that are available. And how is that transitioning? How are you seeing it from your perspective?
Well, a lot of things have changed. One is, and of course, in the last 2 months, things have changed. So, tech is a very rapidly changing world, right? Discretionary budgets are fine, but are gone for a toss in the last 2 months because people are like, hey, if I survive, I'll worry about all this, fancy digital stuff. Let me just survive my business. So, the evolution has been, I think we went from monolithic, large deal, single sourcing to modular sourcing. And now we are talking about what I call, I think, Phil uses horses for courses. And I think we are in that era of horses for courses. If you, as an organization or a supplier or a partner, if you can bring the right value for that particular customer, then they'll be keen to partner with you. They'll be keen to look at you from a size or a scale perspective, which might be different. And if you can't do that, then they will just use horses for courses. They'll give you, you can do a great design. I'll give you a design work to do. And then I move on to find somebody to do me scale. Because end of the day, enterprise business is not just about doing exotic stuff. It also has to do all those lights on. And cloud also, I think, has dramatically changed. Earlier, cloud was more about computing experience. That can I bring my computing cost? Now it's not just about computing experience. Can I change if I put data and analytics together, can I change the kind of use cases that I'm going to solve when my data is on the cloud? So that kind of thing is completely different now, and the deals are being cut like that. So the sizes are shrinking, but at the same time, what they want to do is, if you are predictable and you can handle scale, they'll give you a lot of small things to do. And that's where the large players can play. So large players are saying, hey, I'm a great company because I understand your domain. I can cut all slices of work that you want to do, but I can do it like a factory. And that factorization of digital services is what I see going.
They call this as a pod design in the agile world. You have multiple pods of
Pod
work, and then you actually fractalize it and say, okay, this is the quantum of work, and you continue to deliver. When we look at such delivery, right, what are the metrics that you look at as a leadership, seeing that earlier we used to call this RAG indicators, right? Red, amber, green. At a large program that makes sense, but when you look at it as a smaller one, and which is more and more they are getting aggregated, how do you really look at it as a leader and say, are we doing the right thing? Are we going in the right direction?
So it's very interesting because when my stint outside, we had only agile team. There was no waterfall. Okay, so it was a very interesting experience because I had gone from a waterfall world to a completely agile company. Now, typical agile experiences, people start to look at standard metrics of burn chart and all that. Okay, but to me, that is just an effort. Okay, it's just an effort. How much effort are you burning? The base assumption is that everybody is able to produce the same engineering quality. My learning was that as long as you are working with a small team, which is proven quality of engineers, then you can look at that kind of metrics. But if your engineering is also about learning domain and trying to implement something new, then you have to focus on engineering metrics, which a lot of teams are not able to do that. So my focus, in fact, we run a program called Engineering Excellence, where we say we look at a metric which is relevant for the customer, an engineering metric, and then we work backwards to say what are the changes you need to bring into tools, processes, technology to be able to orchestrate an outcome which is relevant, engineering outcome which is relevant to that particular. Even if it is agile, you have to essentially focus on engineering metrics. I'll give you an example. Let's say I have built a great platform, It's fantastic. It works in a particular geography. But maybe it's not designed around onboarding regulation of new countries. So every time I roll out in a new country, I run into quality issues, right? One way to look at this, oh, my platform works fantastic. There's no problem. But my customer, let's say if the customer is rolling out in a new country and every time the customer runs into problem, then their experience around the engineering quality is based on every time they onboard a new country, which means every time they go for a new revenue, they have a problem with the platform, right? Now, this is something which people will not normally think about to fix it. But when I look at that, we say, oh, this must be fixed. That you may have to go back and change your architecture of the platform itself because you may not have made it modular enough to load new regulations seamlessly, because regulations are not just a file, right? There's a bunch of things that needs to change in your core platform. So how do you re-architect, even if required, the platform itself? So the engineering quality cannot be compromised on the name of Agile. The other thing is, this is something a customer of mine told us. Hey, you can't use Lego blocks to build a rocket. He said it's very interesting because a lot of people are using Agile thinking I can build all kind of complex system using Agile. No, you can't. You have to take, like, so for example, if I want to build a car, I'll take engine and build it separately. I'll take my main platform and build that separately. Maybe my agility will be how quickly I'm able to assemble my engine on top of a platform and ship the car. But I will not try to build my engine and the platform simultaneously in the same team. It's a bad idea because you'll end up messing up both. So I think Agile is also, and Safe and a couple of other have created platform or a process for enterprise Agile. You can do that, but what is called infrastructurally important components need to be built separately. And you can't do it like every day, let's do a release. That doesn't work like that. You have to be really, you have to look at the components and say, okay, this is like sound base. The basis needs to be built. Then you build on top of that. Once you've created a platform, you can do incremental. So Agile is good for incremental, hard to visualize systems. But if I know very clearly what I want to build, then you better build it in a very robust manner and not do like an incremental release. So that distinction is very important. And I think engineering has changed a lot today because of the uncertainty. People are not able to figure out. I mean, I can fully understand. I don't know how my users will interact on a device because my device could become different by the time I roll it out. And next year, maybe it will be very different. 3 years ago, Amazon, Google Talk was like the most exciting thing in the world. Today, people are not necessarily using that much. Maybe that thing will come in the phone itself. So how do I talk to my phone and interact? What if my interface is just my audio of a system? So I think a lot of things will keep changing. So it's important that we build Agile, but then infrastructure components need to be built, like a horizontal thing. So that focus engineering metrics is very important.
There are two stories that are coming to my mind. One is when Amazon Echo was built, they said, I will ensure that the hardware device is the best, how much ever time it takes. And the software I can keep building. Then I will keep adding on to it, and it's easier for me to change it. While the infrastructure, in their case, the Echo hardware was the infrastructure. That I can't change very often. I can't keep saying, you bring it back and the customer. And the same thing with Tesla was brought out. They said they are able to make software changes on an overnight basis. At the same time, the hardware of it cannot change. So that it's important for organizations to think. Sometimes when I coach, I always think, okay, what is it that you want to achieve in 3 months? Measure that and keep making those incremental changes. Rather than talking about functional, we keep talking about, oh, my regression percentage is 90%. How often are you using it? How often are you running it to derive ROI? That is important measure than not just saying, okay, I'm at 90%.
Correct. Absolutely.
How do you think your role is transforming in shaping tomorrow's software? I know from a team perspective, we spoke about helping them enable walking on water, right? That compared to what the customer needs in future, how is that kind of translating in your mind?
I think thanks to Corona, right? I think it's a great opportunity for us to reimagine the way services gets delivered. And the way we are looking at it is, rather than saying X percentage will be remote, somebody who will have a flexibility, we're saying you start with the assumption that everything is remote. Now you assemble back saying what needs to come to a particular physical location. Okay, so that's one dimension, a physical location dimension. The another dimension is about whether you are a permanent versus a gig economy. Gig economy has taken off in the last few years thanks to a lot of product companies. Now, gig economy has not hit the enterprise in such a big fashion. But I think this Corona thing has shown that you can actually integrate gig economy into large-scale enterprise services. And so one is physical space transformation. Other is this whole workforce transformation. And third, I think will be dramatically changed is the collaboration / continuity of things. For example, and this is still early days hypothesis. The reason we need a lot of oversight is because there is a time gap of monitoring that people have on the work which is being performed. So you need people to say, and I've done WBS, I need to check, every day progress, plan, replan, do the risk management, etc. But if you are continuously plugged into something, then do I need that much of extra? Because then if I have a self-managed teams, then the need for oversight should come down. Now, at this stage, this is an hypothesis, right? But I think eventually it will play out, and how it will happen, we'll see. But these three dimensions are very, very deep because it will transform. Now imagine having a tech company running out of India, able to hire programmers in Lithuania without having a physical space. And maybe they're a gig economy, and you can plug that right in the middle of your complex service delivery that you're doing, and then they go out, right? Now, both in terms of quality of service delivery, also in terms of cost of service delivery, a lot of things can transform if you do that. Plus, if I can bring down my cost of oversight, if I hire a self-managed team and I make my team self-managed, my cost of oversight will come down. So if you do these three things right, if you are able to do that, this will completely transform. If you look at today, India is around few cities in terms of tech, right? So we have Bangalore, Pune, Chennai, Hyderabad, tier 2, tier 3 towns. To me, it can be pervasive across India. You could be in Madurai, right? Not having and working for a company which doesn't have presence there. And you be as plugged in using technology as anyone else. And maybe, once a week or once a month, you'll go to a Chennai place and say, hey, I'm here today and I want to do certain things, and then I'll go back. So I think it will transform completely. This has created a tremendous opportunity for organization to reinvent enterprise service delivery. And that's what we are looking at. We are looking at all these models. We're trying to think through. As you know, we don't do anything which is half back. Thinking through all of that, and we have started to. We are not just thinking through. We started to do piloting and start do things around that. When it becomes like an offering, and when it becomes like a market, I think it will be transformational for the industry. So it will completely change the way industry is being done today.
So you're talking about from a workforce management, a physical space management, as well as creating a space where people can come in, finish it, and go, and doing a self-organized. I don't know whether you've read this book, The World is Flat by Thomas Friedman, that was inspired by Nandan Nilekani's one interview. In fact, the last 3 months, I feel things have become a lot more flatter than it was. Absolutely. I can feel that, for example, earlier that the consulting firm for whom I'm doing right now, they felt that everybody has to be in person to deliver. Now you see almost 8-9% productivity has increased. Everybody is doing on their own, and 10-member team is in 3 locations because they've all gone to their native and so on and so forth in the current situation. So a lot of the erstwhile where we thought our own assumptions have been completely shattered, and it is making us rethink.
Absolutely.
It's a changing economy. I think we are also have to keep changing our perspective and breaking our assumptions. Munjay, talk to us about your turning points in your career. What has, if you want to share some for our listeners, what would they be?
My first turning point, I think I used to I was in US, and there was a customer of mine who was working with a large company. They were trying to build a payment system for 3 months. And they came to me and said, can you build this in 2 weeks, not 2 months? So my first reaction was, I usually always say yes, and then I figure out how to do it. So I told the guy, yeah, yes, absolutely. And my boss looked at me and says, you've lost your mind. How can you build something in 2 weeks? And my reaction was, 2 weeks means 14 days. He didn't realize that. He was like, 2 weeks means 10 days because that's like Monday to Friday. I said, no, 2 weeks means 14 days. And it was a Friday, so I added 1 more day. So I said, like 15 days is good enough. And we assembled a team and we built a payment system, and we went to install in the data center. In that data center, it's like, and that was my first experience in a data center. The noise is extremely high. You can't sit there. And we tried to install the payment system for Latin American countries. And the guy who had given us the spec, he got on the phone and says, I'm sorry, I messed up. I gave you the wrong spec. And they were like, excuse me, you gave me a wrong spec? And he said, yeah, I'm sorry about it. And this client of mine said, oh, buddy, tough luck, let's go back. So there was a guy called Ravi. I think he's in another company today. He's in Australia. Ravi and I sat there, and Ravi said, Munjay, I just need 12 hours. Just give me overnight. Product which was built in 2 weeks, which is supposed to be built in 3 months. This 2 of us, we sat there in the data center and we fixed it, and next day it worked. on a spec which was changed. That changed my thinking. I mean, that I started to realize that it's not about scale, it's not about size. Technology is a lot more about innovation. If you can get to that core of innovation, and that's why when I took over the outsourcing deal, I never had any doubt that I can't do it. A lot of people thought that we're still trying to figure out, but in my mind, that came from that experience that I had 6 years ago when I was in US. So those, when you go through that kind of experience, then things like, then you realize that it's about rethinking every customer, every transaction, every application, everything that we are doing. Essentially, we are looking at details and trying to rethink how to do things. That's what technology is about. So today, what is called digital, right? Digital is nothing but a rethinking the way you can generate revenue, the way you can change the cost structure, or the way you can find new market. That's what digital is, right? So if you can rethink, if you can just sit back and relook at the way it is being done and redesign that, I mean, you can be a technologist, and that's why today's world, people who are not a programmer can do great job of technologies. Right? There are a lot of people out in the world who are doing fantastic work because they can reimagine things, and thankfully the tools have become easier to reimagine. So my turning point came in those incidents and those transactions. I have been fortunate. I've had a lot of mentors, a lot of people in the industry who have reached out, and they've always been very supportive. Whenever I have a doubt, even today, I reach out to a lot of people in the industry. So I've built a huge scale of mentors in the industry that I reach out to for advice. And whenever I am in a crossroad, and it has always helped.
Excellent, Munjay. Sounds very interesting to say, okay, you start with a self-belief and create a safety net around you to ensure that you have somebody to ask and get the answer. You are part of a CXO club, right? CEO for the previous firm. How did that, how is that transition? Did you have to change anything from your persona perspective, or how did
it is a lot different as a CXO? Things that when you're not a CXO you probably don't pay attention to. One of the biggest thing of a CXOs is to look at culture. Culture is mostly about future, and I'll give you a simple example of what the way I look at culture. Two families, bringing up children, maybe brothers, they might build different culture. That culture will get encoded as aspiration of the children. 15, 20, 30 years later, the children will end up achieving their aspiration, which was encoded when they were a kid. Organizations are like that. Now I know why somebody like Mr. Murthy used to be so pedantic about culture, see life, and keep talking about it. Because when I went in the role, I realized that you can't be everywhere as a CXO. So you need to create a guide. You can't write down everything. So that guide has to be in terms of a culture, that what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, how you should behave with the customer, what should be important, what should not be important. So culture is something which was like, and unfortunately what happens is not many people are paying attention to culture. So that was my biggest thing that I had to change. I had to learn, A, be conscious and aware of culture, B, then start to make tweaks. If my aspiration is different, then I need to change the culture. You can't have a different aspiration with the same culture. It just doesn't work. It's very different. And I give this example to a lot of people. Companies don't become big and acquire a different thing. Because they have a different thing, that's why they become big. So they have that thinking. You can be world class and small, or you can be large and shoddy. But if you're a world class and small, you will become big. So I think culture is something which was a big thing for me when I took up in a CXO role. The second thing is customers orientation becomes very different. As a CXO, you start to relate a lot more to customers than you would do others. Not just about quarter and a year. The relationships transcends all this. Building relationship, you're dealing with people. And that relationship becomes very, very different when you are in a CXO role versus when you're just managing an account and a project. You can say, yeah, I have a tough luck. I can't do this investment because my boss has told me not to invest. You can't do all that. You have to think about very different paradigm. You have to think about, there's a job being done, there's a business being run, there's a whole bunch of ecosystem dependent on that. How can you support that ecosystem? How can you be relevant in that ecosystem? So thinking is very different when you get into that kind of. And I had to make that change, when I got into.
It's a complete paradigm shift, right? You have to, your word is, you're backing so many people behind you and ahead of you. Right now, we often hear CXOs talking about the quarter, right? They have this short vision of, can I get the next quarter? Can I get the next one? Is that in anomaly or in balance with building a culture for a long term?
No, not at all. See, you have to do both. I mean, it's like you can't build a sustainable organization if you're not focused on correct. It's not possible. I think a lot of people look at terms like long term and think, oh, that means I don't need to worry about today. Or, oh, if I'm talking about culture, that means I can let go of these things. No, absolutely not. You still have to. It's like being healthy. You have to be healthy every day. You can't be healthy 3 months from now, right? So you have to be healthy every day. Organization is like that. You have to worry about it every day. And in fact, if anything, in crisis, for example, you don't even look at quarter, you look at weeks, sometimes days, because every day that you do things, the decision you take will have an implication for you, both in short term and long term. So art is balancing these two. The art is not to say that, oh, I'll go after one pivot, but that's the easy part. Everybody can do it. The tough thing is to balance both short term and long term. And you cannot let go of short term and say, it's okay, I'll survive one day and then I'll deal with it. No, you can't. You have to address the short term. You have to make sure you're taking care of short term to be able to survive and grow in the long term. Sometimes you have to cut short term to invest for long term. And sometimes you have to cut for long term to survive in the short term. And both is right. It's very contextual. So, my biggest learning was to look back at my journey. It took me a while to understand that solutions, ideas, problems, decisions are very contextual. There are a lot of grays. So thinking what is right and wrong and what should we do or not do, and trying to borrow from a book doesn't work. You have to understand the context. You have to get to that. In that context, what is the right thing to do for that specific customer, for that specific instance, for that specific quarter or decision is the way to look at things. Not to look at, oh, this is not being done right, because that's not the right way to do that.
And once the decision is made, rallying the team for decision so that all the future things are the right decision, to ensure that your steps that are taken is based on the right decision. Absolutely, yeah.
It's interesting. One thing I used to say that in leadership role, you take decisions knowing fully well that you might be wrong. So if you are going to sit there and say, all my decisions are right, you're going to be fooling yourself. Never think like that. You should know that some decisions that you take will be wrong, and still you take the decisions. You take the decision, you try to make it right, build a feedback loop, hear back, and if things don't work, or if they're not working, or somebody's telling you something, listen, junk those decisions. You don't have to get married to the decision that, oh, I have taken a decision and I have to stick by it. That's suicidal. You should never do that. So decisions it's very funny because I've seen some execs who are like, oh, I can't decide because I don't want to be wrong. They don't say that, but that's how they behave. That's wrong because you can't do that. If you're in leadership role, you have to take decisions. Sometimes you'll be wrong and it's fine because your intent is right. You're trying to do the right thing. If you see in a great way to understand this concept is go into political space. People take decisions all the time in political space. And a lot of times they're not right. But they still take those decisions because they think at that time, in that context, is the right thing to do. Now, this could be wrong. So I think that is very important. I think leadership should be aware of this. That decisions need to be taken. Some may not be right. If all the decisions are wrong, then you are in the wrong role. Of course. So some may not be right, but you have to follow through, feedback loop, listen to people, make it richer. So the best way to make your decision better is to have smart people around who can critique what you're trying to do, so that they can tell you, oh, you've not thought about this, you've not thought about that's how you become better. You can't become better by having all the answers. You have to have people who can give you the answer.
Absolutely. It's been a very beautiful conversation, Munjay. Our listeners would be super thrilled to hear this. Any thoughts that you want to share in addition?
My only thing which I would love to share, and I tell this to a lot of people, because I see a lot of, especially in the current context, right? There's a lot of gloom and doom around people thinking the world is going to end. I am extremely excited about India as a story. I'm extremely excited about our future. The young generation in this country is doing fantastic work. They are the hope. And I want people to keep that look, there is a tremendous opportunity opening up for the world out there. All these disruptions will result into creation of new. Like said in Mahabharata, right? For every new creation, the destruction must happen. So we are going through that cycle. This digital and all of this is some destructing to create something new. And that new will be something very, very good for a country like us.
Phenomenal way of connecting our traditional Mahabharata current set of things, Munjay. Thank you so much for being here. And I appreciate your time and have a great day ahead.
Thanks, Gayatri. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure. It was great to speak to you today. Thank you.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Malavika for promoting the Software People Stories.
If you like this episode,
please subscribe on your favorite podcast client
and spread the word in your network.
If you'd like to share your story,
contact us at podcasts at pm-powerconsulting.com.